I think you all know I'm the CEO of Safe New Futures, and I think you all know, and that we're a charity helping young people and older people back into work and into employment and training. But we also have this subsidiary training company, Choices Training and Development. And before the pandemic, we were doing some really good work in the corporate workplace and enable people to transition from one type of working to another. For example, if they were downsizing or they're bringing in new tech platforms. And it was fabulous the way the program was working. Now, since the pandemic, we've lost a bit of momentum. So what we're hoping is that all of you here will help us to sort of bring back some of that momentum so we can use those funds that we get and that income we get from the corporate side to help support the charity. So, loneliness at work. Why should we address the issue? Well, it says there, 1/4 of all workers say their mental health has been affected through being lonely. So a lot more are feeling lonely, but 1/4 have actually said it's really affecting my mental health. And then that in turn affects productivity. And there's been a study done by the Co-op and New Economics Foundation that says that it's costing £2.5 billion. So some of that's in increased staff turnover and some of that's in lower job satisfaction, lower productivity. So it really is an issue that, although it sounds a bit esoteric and a bit out there, actually it's something very practical that we need to get to grips with. So, what is it? It's not the same as being alone. It's the pain we feel when our social connections do not meet our needs. So we can be working with lots of different people, but we don't feel socially connected to them for one reason or another. And then we can feel really lonely, even in the midst of a big crowd of people. I think this is... Hello, Peter. Nice to see you. There's a seat here waiting for you.
There's a seat down there.
So, we're going to look at it in time-honoured tradition, 3 points and 3 C's. So we're going to look at the causes of workplace loneliness, the consequences of workplace loneliness, and how to counter workplace loneliness. So some of the causes. Home workers struggle that bit more than people who are on site. And it's just a sense of not feeling close to their colleagues. Now, since the pandemic, of course, hybrid working and home working has been brilliant because people have developed a sort of balance about their work and a work-life balance that was almost impossible before the pandemic. So there's been huge advances forward in many areas, but equally there are a lot of people who are at home and who are struggling and not feeling close to colleagues. So 66%, in fact, compared to on-site workers, who there's only 16% who don't feel close to their colleagues. And those most at risk, would you have known? You might have known that it's mostly young people who are feeling this sense of loneliness for all sorts of other reasons. Some of you will know I've done a couple of white papers. My third white paper is going to be around loneliness, young people and relationships and why that's so difficult. But senior managers, unsurprisingly probably, are at risk of loneliness, and disabled workers come third. So, yeah, young people. They're twice as likely to feel lonely as the average person in the workplace. So Marie's going to talk a little bit later, aren't you, about Gen Z and how to work with young people as well. 2/3 have said it affects their mental health. So if you remember, my statistic earlier was a quarter have said, or less, just under a quarter have said it affects their mental health. With young people, they're saying 2/3 loneliness is affecting their mental health. And the most difficult thing for young people is that so many of them don't feel confident letting their colleagues know, whereas those in the older age groups are more confident in being able to say, hey, I'm struggling, or this isn't working for me. And young people, for whatever reasons, are really struggling to say, I'm struggling, I'm lonely, it's affecting my mental health. And senior managers, we've all heard that phrase, lonely at the top. And it's really difficult as senior managers, and that's why, you know, our program as well is really, it is aimed for, we have in the past done a lot of work with front-facing staff and customer services staff, but actually we have a program that's really aimed at senior managers too, because senior managers have to be a lot of things to a lot of people. So I've just put some words here. Innovate, be tenacious, be resilient, keep moving people out of their comfort zones, making things happen, energize the team, and bringing everybody with us. And no doubt Peter is going to be able to give a much more in-depth view on how to how to be a leader, very well respected leader in the city that he is. So yeah, we have to be accountable. So I just think of the early days. I joined Safe New Futures about going on 9 years ago now. Well, 8.5, and it's quite difficult because, you know, at the time I joined Safe New Futures, things had gone from being really quite a large, vibrant organisation to being a tiny organisation. And Jackie here was there at the time when it was a large, vibrant organisation, weren't you? Then you left. Maybe that's what happened. And yeah, so I arrived at a time when there'd been huge losses and huge redundancies and huge loss of staff, and the accountant had had a breakdown. That was a really difficult one. Maybe it was because of the huge losses. I don't know. But yeah, and so I sort of came in thinking I need to close this place down, but saw what a fantastic thing it was. And then had to sort of go to the trustees and say, we don't have a viable business model. What are we gonna do? And then, of course, I had to make, you know, difficult decisions about how we were going to operate going forward. So that meant making people work a lot harder, and it meant not buying all the stuff that people might have been used to sort of having, and so cutting back at the same time as having to sort of get people to work harder, and then also having to bring in funding. And so yeah, there was a lot of difficult decisions, which, you know, doesn't always make us popular, does it? And then, you know, you have to take risks. So during the pandemic, of course, you know, I had to take huge risks in going from a face-to-face training program, which was so effective because it used to run all day, you know, sort of from 10 to 3, with people who were struggling to socialise, and they'd come in, we'd share lunch together, we'd have coffees together, we'd have all this face-to-face interaction all day, to suddenly doing a program that was online. So it was an hour-and-a-half workshop in the morning, an hour-and-a-half workshop in the afternoon, and all that sort of camaraderie that happened over lunchtimes, that happened over coffees, you suddenly had to try and recreate in an online setting, which was absolutely massive. And I thought, wow, what do? We close down, or we make this risk and we go ahead and do it. And fortunately, lots of funders backed us and went, go ahead. And it's harder doing it online, but actually it's been amazing because post-pandemic, people are struggling to leave the house. And so they wouldn't be coming to our face-to-face programs, even if we were able to put them on. We're now operating throughout about 5 different places in Surrey, which we never would have been able to do if we hadn't gone online. We're working right throughout Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Gosport, Havant, Waterlooville, Fareham, as well as all around Southampton. Again, none of that would have happened. So, you know, I didn't foresee that. I didn't know all that. I just knew we had to do something. And, you know, it's worked out. But you have to take risks. And people don't understand why you're doing it. And you can't see the end. But yeah, it's a lonely place. So, anyway, yeah, you have to model resilience and sometimes face misunderstanding. So what's the consequences of workplace loneliness? The biggest one is disengagement. It's called quiet quitting. And a Gallup poll report said that 59% of the global workplace is not engaged. It's actually larger in England. And then there's loud quitting. We all know about the loud quitters. And then there's the thriving at work, the ones that are really enjoying what they're doing and getting on with it. But these quiet quitters are filling a seat, they're watching the clock, they're putting in minimum effort, they're minimally productive, they're likely to be stressed and burnt out and often blame the organisation, and they can feel lost and disconnected from their workplace. And It's difficult because they're not often being actually disruptive, unlike our loud quitters, who are taking actions that harm the organisation, they're undercutting goals, they're opposing leaders, and that's almost easier to deal with. But actually, we don't have time to go into it now, the quiet quitters are the ones that represent the most opportunity. They're just waiting for someone to come alongside them, understand them, turn things round for them. So let's spot our lonely colleagues. Just some of the ways we can kind of work out who those people might be, because there's such a stigma around loneliness. How many people are going to come into the workplace and, you know, say, how was your weekend? Actually, I was really lonely. Have you ever heard that? I haven't. Have I ever said it? No, I haven't. Have I ever felt it? Yes, I have. So yeah, it's not easy to spot people who are struggling with loneliness. But you can kind of, obviously these symptoms can be symptomatic of all sorts of things. But just keep an eye out for colleagues who are unwell, who are stuck on negatives, who are spending time alone, who appear distant from the rest of us, who are perhaps a little bit less productive than normal, who are struggling with confidence and self-esteem and not constantly wanting reassurance, am I doing all right, and taking things personally if something's going wrong. And so there's that sensitivity to rejection, and they can often feel, again, stressed, depressed and anxious. And a lot of it can be as a result of this concept of loneliness that we don't really talk about. So, countering it. Peer groups. We do a lot of that, obviously, in our courses, and getting people together who understand each other. I was talking to one of our candidates, our course participants yesterday, and he said it was just phenomenal. He'd had lots of individual CBT therapy, understood CBT therapy, very sort of intelligent, able person, but it wasn't until he came into our group and experienced the normalization of his feelings. And so although, you know, he was this highly able, highly intelligent person, to come into this group and say, everyone else is feeling the same as me. They're totally different from me, but they're feeling the same, was incredible. And again, the socialization aspect of it. When I went to CTEC last week, I met one of our course participants who was 2 years out of the course, and he said he'd just been at home. He'd been made redundant, so he's looking after the children, but had got himself totally isolated. So to come, you know, into a group where people wanted to speak to each other and to get that peer support was phenomenal. But, sorry, I'm getting carried away, aren't I, talking about the charity? I'm not meant to be talking about the charity. I am meant to be talking about what we can do to counter loneliness. So, for example, I've joined a peer-to-peer group, where I'm meeting other people who are running small organisations, and we get together and we chat. So, you know, do try and make sure that there's peer groups that you can join, that your team can join, that your employees can join, just to get that feeling of, hey, I'm not alone here. There are people here who get me, who understand me. They're running different kinds of businesses, but we're all feeling the same. Safe, friendly, I should say non-judgmental environment. The E should be after the G, but never mind. So yeah, it's not always easy to create, but just creating a feeling where people are not judged for what they say, for what they do, that they're accepted, is a priority. And then we do things like practical assessment tools. We use I3 profiling, but there's lots of there's Compass profiling and all sorts of other profiling systems, just to help people to understand themselves, to understand their colleagues, to understand why they might be reacting in a certain way. So for example, some people might be working 4 out of 5 days from home, and it really suits them, and they love the one day they come in, but actually they're really happy 4 out of 5 days at home, because it suits their way of working, suits their personality, suits the way they're very goal-oriented, and that works for them. Other people can be, 4 out of 5 days at home, or even 5 days at home, and struggle and feel so lonely and so terrible, because they need the stimulation, the buzz of things around them, and so on. I mean, I know Yasmin, for example, will go out there to work just because sometimes the office is too quiet. She likes the buzz behind her. And that, that helps her to be really productive. So it's important to understand that not one size fits all. Everybody's an individual. Everybody needs their, to understand their best way of working. And then also, encountering loneliness, it's about a value system. So we have really strong value system within Safe New Futures, always have done since the very beginning, checking, and we've kept those values going all these years. And we've tried to make it simple, ABC, but actually it's really quite in depth, and a lot of time and effort has gone into who we are. But authenticity is one, being vulnerable, being open about who we are, about the struggles we face, belief in ourselves, love for ourselves and others, encouraging each other, celebrating our wins. I do remember once talking to somebody, and they were sort of in an advisory capacity, and they were quite frequently sort of picking at, well, what happens if, that could be wrong, there's a risk there, and why would you do that? And life was full of risk and difficulty, and at one point I said, look, don't take this the wrong way, but that's not the way we work at Safe New Futures. We're about encouraging each other, we're about celebrating the wins, we're about going, hey, this has worked. I mean, we're not stupid either. Obviously, we look at the downsides, but it's not constantly about risk. Well, if you're coming, say, from a high-risk environment, a financial institution or some other kind of institution, it's all about risk, isn't it? It's all about thinking what could go wrong. So it's a different culture. But I'm pleased to say we are in an environment where we can be positive, supporting, forward-looking, and risk-taking without feeling the whole world's going to fall down on us. And then the C, ABC, is about being connected, empowered, motivated, and committed to excellence. So I know that's such a phrase, isn't it? Committed. We're all committed to excellence, obviously. But genuinely, we want to go over and above what we say we're going to do. And we really care about doing that. And so I'm just going to quickly go through these last 4 slides, because they're all about our corporate program. And so if anybody wants to know about the corporate program that we're running in the marketplace, it's about navigating change, and we're all going through change. So that's a big module that we'd be really pleased to run with anybody you might know. It's about harnessing the power of our thoughts, because our thoughts can lead us in all sorts of terrible ways, and it's about how to get control of those thoughts, to get control of our lives and our behaviours. And that is also about increasing productivity. Increasing productivity is about being motivated, and intrinsic motivation, as the name says, is from within, rather than being motivated by extrinsic rewards. So that's the program we're running in the marketplace, and we do have 4. And this is why we're doing it: to help employees become engaged, find their work meaningful, feel connected, and feel connected to the organisation as well as the team. So the taster workshops, one's overcoming adversity, and this is all about helping us to change our perspectives on difficult situations. We all go through difficult situations. Some of our situations are more difficult than others, but it's still about being hello Peter, welcome. It's about being able to gain a perspective that's positive through them. Healthy workplace mindsets, about improving productivity and effective teamwork through overcoming unhealthy thinking. So just as unhealthy habits, food habits, dietary habits, lifestyle habits result in unhealthy bodies, so unhealthy thinking results in unhealthy behaviours. So we look at that. Team motivation. As I said earlier, if we're just waiting for someone externally to motivate us, that's really not going to get us very far. And it's about how to uncover intrinsic motivators and managing stress. So some stress is good, being stretched is good, but remaining in our comfort zone can almost be as stressful as being pushed right out into our stress zone. So it's how to manage all of that. So, loneliness at work, in summary. The pain we feel when our social connections do not meet our needs. It's not necessarily about who's around us. It's about discovering who needs to be in that place with people around them, who needs to be in that place without people around them, but mostly how to get those connections going. So we've looked at the causes of workplace loneliness. Please come talk to me afterwards because it's been a brief overview, or read my white papers on the website. We've looked at the consequences of workplace loneliness, which is big consequences in terms of mental health and productivity, and a little dive into how to counter workplace loneliness. And I know that Peter and Marie are going to be talking about some of those issues in more depth. And if you do manage to get the word out there to corporates to buy our programs, you'll be helping so many people around Hampshire and Surrey, 50% who will go on to further education, training, voluntary work or employment, 70% who will be less depressed, 85% who will increase in confidence and self-esteem, and 75% who will be less anxious. So please do get the word out there, and thank you for listening. So now, before we pass over to, I think it's Peter next, you've got 5 minutes to talk to each other, introduce yourselves to each other, grab a croissant if you want, or a